If you're interested in how contemporary practitioners see, perceive, and work with the goddess Hecate, stay tuned, because you're just about to see the paper I delivered at the conference of the European Association for the Study of Religions 2022 at the University College Cork in Ireland. Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Angela Tuca and I will be talking about the goddess Hecate and how she's been reframed in the contemporary world. I use the word Witchtok on my title because I will of course be talking about TikTok and the community that has been created over there, which is called Witchtok or Witches of TikTok. But I will more generally be talking about Hecate, the Greek goddess, and how she's been reinterpreted in a contemporary world that engages a lot with the online social media world. So first of all, I want to thank Joseph Sedgwick because he's studying a PhD at the University of Edinburgh on the goddess Hecate. And we had a conversation and he gave some interesting insights and sources, so I wanted to acknowledge that. Also, my methodology is based on reading and accessing primary and secondary sources on the matter, especially primary sources because there isn't really much on the matter in terms of academic scholarship, and in ethnography, which is a methodology for the study of online communities and context using ethnographic research techniques, and SLV, which I started quite recently, as you can tell, on the 14th of June, and I collected 410 responses. Actually, now there are more because they are still coming in, but those are the ones that I will be using for this talk. So first of all, who is Hecate, at least in a brief historical overview? She was seen as quite harmless in Hesiod in the Theogony, and later becomes to be seen more threatening as a goddess. We will see that she is, or used to be defined as a dark goddess, as a dark mother goddess, but in more recent years, and thanks to online exchanges and development of how this goddess has been seen, now she's not seen as much as a dark goddess, but for quite some time you could see her described as a dark goddess. You don't have this threatening element in Hesiod and in the Theogony. Then during the Hellenistic and Roman times, she was worshipped as a regional mother goddess. And in the Eleusinian myth and cult, she is also quite kind and caring. And she helps Demeter in her search for Persephone. And after the reunion of mother and daughter, she becomes Persephone's minister and attendant. And then we have that in the Chaldean oracles, that was adopted by Neoplatonists, Hecate becomes an epiphanic celestial deity and cosmological principle, so the cosmic soul, accessible through ritual as well as contemplation. So this is kind of the historical background of the goddess. Now, in the contemporary world, there are a few authors that have spoken a lot about the goddess Hecate. One of these is Sorita D'Este, who has a community around Hecate and has written a few books about Hecate. And she focuses a lot on the history of the goddess and her development from history. And in a way, she contributes to how it is now being seen. And then there's the group, the Covenant of Hecate, which has a website which is amazing as a resource on the goddess Hecate. And as you can see, even though in popular culture, there's a gigantic list of all the books and movies and TV shows and everything that has talked about Hecate. And so it gives a good sense of how this figure, this goddess, has been perceived throughout the ages. And we will see that there has been quite an evolution from Hecate being seen as a threatening figure to now that contemporary practitioners are still attaching her to in some way to the darkness, but in a very different way, in a way that is more perhaps enlightening. Then we have another known author, Jason Miller, who focuses a lot on Hecate, and he focuses a lot on sorcery and magic with regards to Hecate, and he also has a course called The Sorcery of Hecate. And in his case, differently from Sorita D'Este and the Covenant of Hecate, there is less of an emphasis on the historical figure and more of an emphasis on the relationship that the practitioner creates with the goddess, and in a way that affects how the goddess is perceived. It is maybe a bit more based on the individual experience. Of course, you have that across the board, I would say, with contemporary practitioners, but there are some practices and some authors and some, in this case, he defines himself as a sorcerer, that tends to focus on that element a bit more. And also he associates her a lot with protection, but not just with that, but more generally to associate her to the magic practice. Then we have Hecate in a few TV shows, like in Charmed and in Buffy. And in this case, in Buffy, you see her as the goddess of witches, which is a common thing which you find across magic practitioners, the idea that Hecate is the goddess of witches. In Charmed, she is kind of the queen of the underworld. That's another element associated with Hecate. She is often associated with the underworld, with the world of the dead. She's a psychopomp deity and allows people to interact with dead. So you have this element in Charmed, and in Buffy you see her as a goddess of witches. And then in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is more recent, you have that she, in a way, substitutes Lucifer. Because in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, you have that the witches are followers of Lucifer, and then they overthrow Lucifer because there is an acknowledgement of certain misogynistic aspects, and basically the main deity, the main divine figure, becomes Hecate. So it's interesting how she's portrayed. Hecate, gatekeeper, guardian, and guide, stand with us side by side. Hecate, light your torch's flame. The torch's flame are another element that is often represented in images about Hecate. We call your name, hallowed maiden, mother crone, through the dark your light be shown. And interesting also this element of maiden, mother crone. And in Wiccan circles and Wiccan-inspired magic practitioners, you do see Hecate associated with the tribal goddess, the idea of maiden, mother crone, whereas others are criticizing this reading of Hecate because it is based on Robert Gray's book, The White Goddess, and has been then adopted by Wiccans. But actually, even though Hecate was being seen as a tribal goddess even in antiquity, she wasn't seen as a maiden, mother crone, or in some cases she has been associated to the crone more specifically because of that dark element and that connection with the world of dead. But actually she was defined in antiquity even as the protector of the young, and there were sacrifices being made to her of puppies because of the association with youth. So this is a more Wiccan interpretation of the goddess Hecate that has been challenged by contemporary practitioners. And you'll see conversations about this online. Now on to Witchtok. As I was saying earlier, there is a community on TikTok. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what TikTok is. TikTok is an app, a social media platform, we can define it as, that became more popular among the younger generation, but now I say it is becoming more popular more widely across the ages. And TikTok became famous for the dances and lip syncing over parts of movies, and it is quite an entertaining platform. and people try to convey messages through the use of images and sound and music in a way that conveys a very brief message, and usually the TikToks tend to be very short, and they are short and punchy, so they keep you engaged on the platform. And over time, there has, you see that the formation of this community on TikTok, which has been called Witchtok, or Witches of TikTok. And it has created a community in itself, and there are conversations about witchcraft and magic. And interestingly, Hecate is quite popular as a goddess on the platform on Witchtok. And so you will see here I screenshotted 3 popular TikToks on Hecate, but there are many. So if you hashtag Hecate on TikTok, you will find many TikToks. So some elements that you find as recurring themes on Hecate on Witchtok are that she's the goddess of witchcraft, and magic. That's why she's quite popular. She's quite popular on Witchtok because on Witchtok darkness is quite popular. So the dark deities are quite popular at the moment. So she is seen as the goddess of witchcraft and magic. She's considered to be powerful, and so if you are engaging with witchcraft and you're interested in witchcraft, it's desirable to be working with Hecate, even though you need to wait for her to call you and to engage with you. This is something that you also find as a recurring thing in the discourse that happens on TikTok. Also, she's seen as a dark mother goddess, so you still see this element of darkness, but as we will see later, it is a darkness that is not linked to evil or something that is evil. Also, Hecate is associated with Lucifer, and this is quite interesting because, as I said, you find this also in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and I'm not sure whether it is related, it could be not related, but it's interesting how there are witches that work with Hecate and Lucifer as, in a way, the goddess and the god, portraying them in a similar manner as 2 divine figures that have an element of darkness, but are also able to bring you to bring the light to you, to bring you the light. Because Lucifer comes from Latin, Luciferus, which means bringer of light, and Hecate has also been associated has also been called in antiquity bringer of light at one point. So interestingly now, there are magic practitioners that are working with these 2 deities as dark deities that can allow you to access, to shed light in a way onto a darkness in a way that allows you to proceed and evolve on your spiritual or religious journey. And on the topic, shadow work is another very recurring element associated with Hecate. And shadow work is in the discourse, in the witchcraft based discourse, is working with this based on interpretation of Carl Jung's psychology, and the idea that the shadow is the repressed, hidden side of yourself. And so shadow work is a spiritual endeavor that as a magic practitioner you will take so that you can face your inner demons, you can face the hidden parts of yourself, you can face all the elements, the trauma, all the aspects that are painful and that are in the dark, but they are still controlling your life and your responses to the world and to others and even to yourself. So it's quite fascinating how people are working with Hecate as a way to foster and help the shadow work. And shadow work is considered as a spiritual practice, but also as part of the magic practice that people engage with. Now on to my survey, which as I said, I collected over 400 responses. Of course, not every single question was answered by all of them. As you can see here, we have fewer than 400, but There are some interesting conclusions that can be drawn from the survey. So the first one, and this links very well to the previous paper where we talked about hard polytheism and soft polytheism. Briefly, again, hard polytheism is believing that gods are ontologically real and they are separated from us. And soft polytheism is the idea that gods are archetypes or they are not ontologically real and separate from us. They can be seen as real in a way that is more linked to the individual that practices, in the way of being an inner part of the person or an energy or a force, but not ontologically real in the same way. And even though there are these two specific terms, you can see that in most cases it's more a spectrum, and it's not like one practitioner is solely a hard polytheist or solely a soft polytheist. It's more a spectrum. So the first thing that we see is that hard polytheism prevails over soft polytheism. And this is something that I discussed with Joseph, that I acknowledged in the beginning, because he also noticed that in his research. So now, for the majority of the respondents, Hecate is an independently existing entity or deity. So those who work with Hecate seem to believe that she is ontologically real. So we have a hard polytheistic approach that is sort of prevailing here. Then we see that another interesting aspect is that for people, here I asked how important was for people, being adherent to the mythology and the history regarding the goddess. And interestingly, the average response was 6. So it's not all that important for practitioners to stick to the historical, to a historical understanding of the deity, because for a lot of practitioners, actually what matters is the relationship that they create with the deity. It's not really what Hesiod said about Hecate. It's more about what occurs as a result of their relationship with the goddess. Then also Hecate is strictly linked to magical practice. Do you work with Hecate for magical purposes? An overwhelming 75% answered yes. So Hecate is clearly, for practitioners, a deity that is linked to magic. And for a lot of them, she is the goddess of witches and the goddess of magic. Then, do you believe that Hecate is associated with shadow work, which I was mentioning earlier? Again, an overwhelming 73% answered yes. So Hecate is now being associated with shadow work, and the idea that on your spiritual journey as a magic practitioner, Hecate can help you shedding some light on your shadow self, on the hidden parts of your past and of yourself. Then, what's the most important thing to understand about Hecate? And here, there were 400 responses. It was an open-ended question, so everybody said something different. But I highlighted here a few things that were recurring, representative of what other responses were also saying. So Hecate is not just about death and dark magic. She is light bearer, guide, protector, teacher, and more. So again, you have a challenge. You have people challenging the idea of her as a dark goddess, but there is still an element of darkness that is associated with her. But at the same way, a darkness that can shed a light on your journey. Like all gods, she represents both good and evil, and worship of any pagan god will break away from the duality of mainstream religion. This is another interesting element because I highlighted it here because it shows how for practitioners that work with Hecate, you don't have a very demarcated ethical stance. So the ethics is much more fluid. She's not maiden mother prone. So as we saw, this view has been challenged, which was influenced by Wicca. She's not all plush and sweet. She's stern, but yet motherly. And so once again, you have this sense that she's quite. There is this element of darkness and sternness, but at the same time, practitioners find help in working with her. Hecate is her own energy, her own entity. All the mythology and history about her is perception of her energy. She does not have to be antiquated and morose. She can be light and sassy and humorous. So this is also another interesting aspect that I think mirrors also what we have already said about the goddess. So thank you for your attention, and I am also on TikTok. That's how I gathered my data, and I also have a YouTube channel where I disseminate academic scholarship on the subject of magic, witchcraft, esotericism, and paganism. So thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions.
So this is it for today's video. If you like my content and want me to keep the academic fun going, please consider supporting my work with a one-off PayPal donation by joining memberships or my inner symposium on Patreon, where you will get access to our Discord server, monthly lectures, and lots of other perks depending on your chosen tier. And if you did like this video, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so that you will never miss a new upload from me. And as always, stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.